show. If you're wondering why we had such a lumpy intro into it, it's actually quite funny. Today we're going to be talking about our special topic. We have a menopause special. Any idea why we were actually late onto the studio? Shall I tell you? It's because me and Adele's my co-host, we were just chatting. We're chatting away. We're jawing. We totally lost track of the time in a bit of a, what would you call it? A fog.
Still business. We were talking business.
And we were chatting away. We were chatting away about community managers and communities and people we're taking on and all of that sort of thing and general stuff. So look, we're supposed to be on air. Quick, hang on.
Exactly. We are just rolling.
So here we are. So I'm Sian Murphy. My co-host, introduce yourself.
So I am Adelle, and listen to this. I keep women in business on most days. So I coach midlife women on all things menopause and business.
And I don't quite know what I do. I host the Women in Business radio show. I host events for women in business, and I work one-to-one with women in business, helping them do their own thing and create personal freedom through their own business. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we're talking about menopause. It may interest you to know that both of us are over 50. Both of us have experienced, I certainly have experienced some of the more interesting sides of menopause. Adelle is a menopause expert, and so I think we are well placed to be it's just going to be it's a chat, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a chat. We had set out to have some sort of structure. I thought it was time we put a little bit of structure into the Women in Business radio show. And as we don't have a guest in the studio today, I thought the perfect time to try it out. So we sat ourselves down and we got some paper out, because I do like a pen and paper. We got some paper out and we sat down to plot out a little bit of structure to the show. And how far did we get? Really not very far at all, did we? Because we started gossiping about something else. So we have no structure. We've got no questions. We have no idea what we're going to be doing, but we do know that we are going to be focusing on the menopause and what it means. What it means if you're a woman in business. Some of the things that you may be experiencing, that you may be finding challenging at the moment, that you may not actually be putting down to the menopause. So we are going to start off with a little sort of, what would we call it? Would we call it a topic or a little area? The words have totally lost me. I've had it, really. We're going to start off with our little feature.
I like
Tiny,
I'll write that down.
tiny little feature of what did you learn this week? And I'm rather hoping that Adele's got something, because actually, do you know, I can't really think of anything at all. Adelle, what did you learn this week?
What did I learn this week? Again, Sian, so it's coming out more and more post-lockdown here in the UK, is to be more efficient with the diary. So I was used to having meetings back-to-back via Zoom and not putting much travel in, and then the last couple of days realised actually I need to go back yet again to the diary. So what that's saying is, as we're coming out of lockdown, what I thought I had a plan, I'm having to shape. And from talking to lots of other women as well, I'm not the only one. So we're still trying to find our feet with normal. So my learning is, do not be hard on myself, because it may take a few weeks to get back to, I won't say normal, but what will be our new world.
Yes, it's that not being too hard on yourself. Okay, I've realised that I'm actually creating my own situation that creates some exhaustion for me, and I am doing it even when I don't have to. So I run events. I run regular monthly events where we serve food, we have a cafe, as well as lots and lots of exhibitors. And what I did before lockdown was basically run around like an idiot all day, not eating, dashing around on adrenaline, get to the end of the day where I've been lifting tables, moving stuff around, haven't sat down at all, get home absolutely knackered, and then have to lie around like a great big slug all day on Monday. So I decided that this wasn't going to happen anymore, that when we reopened... As we reopened our events, there were going to be sufficient staff there, sufficient people on board, so that actually I didn't have to do that. And that's exactly what I did. I had sufficient staff on board so that I did not have to do that. And I think you know what I did.
You did it.
I did it.
Yep.
And so on Tuesday, after I recovered, I'm thinking, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I did that. And then when I actually sat and thought about it, it was sort of what I do. I actually run around wafting. I call it wafting, professional wafter. But that's what I do. I walk around doing everything for everybody. And part of the, hey, I haven't sat down all day and dashing around, I see it almost as exercise. And that was the other thing, is I haven't really moved for 15 months. So suddenly,
making up for it.
Suddenly getting up and packing the car and unpacking the car and then, taking it all into the venue, running around like an idiot all day and then doing it all in reverse. But this is something that I'm actually creating myself, because I had opportunities where I could have delegated stuff and I didn't. I didn't do as much delegation as I could. And so I need to sit back and sort of re-examine whether I am creating my own panic situation, whether I'm creating my own busyness, and why I might be doing that.
Absolutely. And, as you said that, I had some tasks, I've got somebody supporting me, and it was like, oh, I'll do that. And actually, why am I doing it? Am I more anxious that I'm doing it or anxious that they're doing it? So it's that, for me, it's that element of that control. And you're like, I'm creating my own fire, then I'm putting my own fire out and then sitting down. Why am I doing this?
I think some of it also might be, and this may come up later on as we talk more about menopause and some of the hidden symptoms, which they're not going to be hidden anymore because I'm about to say what they are, is that sometimes I find it difficult to explain things to people. I find it difficult sometimes to organise in my mind what I'm doing, and in sufficient detail, I'm doing it now, look, in sufficient detail to then be able to explain it to somebody. And sometimes actually that is just too much trouble. It's not that the person isn't capable. I just can't get the words out in the right way to get somebody to do what it is that I want. And so I might as well just go and do it myself. And then when it's a really busy situation, sometimes that's sort of actually what you have to do. But there are other times when actually there is that time to sit down and explain it to somebody. And yet sometimes I still find that a really, really difficult thing to do. And it's that communication thing. And I think that's linked in some way to confusion, brain fog, all of that sort of thing.
Absolutely, Sian, it is. And what I found is I find it easier with pictures or videos sometimes than just trying to explain. And I am a visual person anyway, but up until my menopause, I could probably go between, telling people and writing it and drawing pictures. But when I am in menopause mode, I'm having a moment, then I know my default, the only way of explaining it to somebody would be a picture, a video, or just telling the story. I like yourself and also, when you do have the energy to think it through and to explain it, I actually need to lay down just by explaining it. So do I have a lay down by explaining it, or do I have a lay down because I do it and I know it's done? So absolutely, I can so echo with that. And I talk to women daily who have this same challenge. And sometimes women, before they realise it's menopause, I know we're drifting slightly, they actually think it's them. That's the hard bit.
And I know now that it isn't me, that I'm not actually dim, that I do have trouble sometimes explaining how a process is supposed to work and what I want to happen. And I find it a lot easier actually to come up front about that and sort of explain that, initially at the outset, hey guys, I'm ever so sorry, I may have trouble explaining this, but it's really, please just ask me a question. If you really don't get what I want, what's supposed to be happening, just come back. I'm not going to be at all offended. I don't think you're dim. It's me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. And that was the biggest thing I had to do. I had to get over and say, actually, so if you were driving a car, you'd have an L plate on. If you was starting somewhere new, you'd have trainee on your badge. I was not going to have menopause put on my badge on the back of my car. But what I would do is say, look, guys, it's not you, it's me. You don't like it when someone says that to you, do you? But,
straight away.
Something's coming, it's not you, it's me.
Straight away, it's them.
And I say, look, guys, I am of a woman of a certain age, etc. So it's not you, it really, really is me. And don't be offended like you if you come back. It took a little while to actually set that stall out. It was much easier with friends and family, but a little bit...
Is it? Is it really?
I've tried to do that in a boardroom with men, and it was a bit more challenging. So, sometimes it is.
I'm not sure it is easier with friends and family, to be honest. I think because, if I'm talking to somebody who's working with me or for me, I'm sort of on my best behaviour.
Yeah, but maybe I just tell my family.
When I'm with my family, I spend an awful lot of time apologising.
I'll top up the emotion bank account first before I open the drawer.
I sort of open the door and I say, I'm sorry, before I've even gone into the room.
Oh, dear.
So that's back to what we learned this week. So you're accepting that things have moved on, and we have to go a little bit easier on ourselves and accept that. I didn't realise how much I had, if you like, slipped over that 15 months. And, what used to take about 10 minutes to pack everything up. And these are quite large events as well. So I'm not talking about just putting a notebook in my handbag and going out. What used to take us about 15 minutes to sort of we have a truck and a car all going with us to the events. That used to take about 10 minutes to get that sorted. I was still running backwards and forwards after about an hour and a half. So, you may well have got out the groove, actually.
Absolutely.
You got out the groove, and I could feel that by the end of the first day, the end of the day for that very first event, I was starting to get back into that groove again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's finding that groove and that different groove or something a little bit different, but accepting that actually, and when you actually say it out loud, 15 months is a long time. It's not 3 weeks on holiday.
It didn't seem like that, did it? And I tell you, the other thing that I learned is that I have slowed down.
Yes.
And I didn't really appreciate how much I had slowed down. And that's the other thing. I could feel myself getting faster. I could feel myself getting quicker and quicker as the day went on. And I was getting more sort of back to myself. And I think that's another thing that we have to accept is we may well have slowed down. We may well be walking. I tell you what, catch yourself in the supermarket, because that's what I did. And I was strolling around. Just strolling around like I had all day in the world, and I didn't particularly want to be there. It wasn't really Waitrose is lovely, but it wasn't. I was in there to get some stuff and leave, and I was basically window shopping, wandering around with my mouth open, sort of really not doing anything constructive, and certainly not getting out the shop, which is actually what I wanted to do. I wanted to sort of go. I wanted to go swimming basically, and I'm strolling around, wandering from aisle to aisle, and I have got slow. And it's time to sort of get that speeded up.
Absolutely. And also for me, it's getting speeded up, but actually I don't want to go back to how I actually was on lockdown. Because I actually, when I look back, I was driving, going around all over the place. So for me personally, it really stopped me in my tracks. So and again, this is probably why I really overthought my diary this week and thinking, oh my God, I want to speed up, but I don't want to go back to how I was. There was an element of, I don't want to go back to that
but
either.
That's different, isn't it? There's speeding up, as in, I've got a job here to do that I don't particularly want to, want to do it. It just needs to be done. And, let's get a bit of a march on and get this done and get out the place and get it over and done with. And I think there's a very, very big difference between that and actually racing around from one thing to another, not having time to plan, not sitting down, just doing action. They're two very, very different things. I don't want to spend 3 times longer doing some shopping than I'd rather do the shopping, thank you very much, and go swimming or go and do something else. And it's about picking what what do you do? What have you speeded up? What do you do fast? And that's very different, isn't it?
Absolutely. And going, actually, I want to do that fast, but I'm not going to do this. And actually hold on to that as well, because if you're not careful and things go back or you do things, you can end up slipping back into bad habits. And for me, I'm like, absolutely not going to go there.
But I had no idea how slow I had got. And so when we're setting up for the event, I'm poodling up and down like I've got all day. And I haven't got all day, because the doors are going to open at 10 o'clock and people are going to come in. And I had got used to how long, it took this long. Once we get to the venue, it takes an hour to get it set up. And there I am wandering around, and suddenly I think, oh, hang on a minute. I've got 5 minutes until the doors open and none of this is done. So basically allow 3 times longer than you would have done if you're going back and you're doing the same, something that you were doing before, something that you were used to doing, something that you thought you had a system for. Don't make that assumption. That's what I did. I assumed that I had a system. I assumed I had something that worked, and actually it sort of worked. It just needed 3 times longer.
Absolutely.
So that's what I learnt. But also that I'm creating my own busyness, action and exhaustion, and that needs to stop.
Absolutely.
We've got another topic, haven't we?
We have.
We've got another topic. It's what are you reading or listening to at the moment?
So it's so interesting. So sometimes I go back to basic books. Okay, and these are my long and trusted friend. So for the moment, and it does link back to the diary, and for me taking the decision to not slow down in August, but choose it. And that is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by wonderful Stephen Covey. And
that old thing.
I have, and do you know why? Because there's a funny story there. When I was very early on in my career, and I thought I knew it all, because you do. And then no one could tell me or wanted to tell me. So I actually got it in a Secret Santa. Everybody else got really interesting gifts, and I got this, and someone said to me, "We really love you, Adelle, but you really need to read this, especially the one about interacting with people." So as a very young age, but do you know what, Sian? I'm so glad I got that book early in my career, and it is old, tried and tested, and I've just followed those habits all the way through.
When I said that old thing, it wasn't. I wasn't being horrible about the book at all. It's because it's something that I think comes up so often that it's almost become a cliche, and that we take it for granted and we don't bother reading it because we think it's perhaps out of date. It's no longer relevant. Everybody mentions it. And that's not the case at all. Very often the things that are taken for granted are the most important things that you can read. And I'm actually going to go and reread that.
Yeah.
I am.
And it's so precious to me because it's still that original copy and I still read it. And it is just an amazing book. And I think I should read it every year, but as always, I read it when I just about need it. And it's got a very personal thing to me. And it was that really put me forward, and my wonderful team at the time. It was a gift. It was a gift that keeps on giving.
What I'm reading at the moment possibly isn't really to do with business, but we have to read other stuff apart from business stuff. I'm reading and listening to a book by a guy called Ben Goldacre, who is a doctor, who is, I think he still is, a journalist for The Guardian. And his speciality is examining and debunking some of the sort of medical myths and the stats, the statistics and the methodology behind some of the medical claims, some of the stories that are out there that we have sort of latched onto, that the journalists have latched onto, and which have almost sort of become part of our DNA of what we believe and don't believe. And the book I'm reading at the moment, he does quite a few books. There's one that's Bad Science, which is really, really good as an audiobook. But the one that I'm reading at the moment by him, which is along a very, very similar theme, is called I Think You'll Find It's a Bit More Complicated Than That.
Oh, I like that.
And it's a brilliant book for giving insights. It's also a really, as to how what we hear and what we read, even from the most sort of tried and tested places, the BBC, Panorama, all of this sort of thing, are actually a pile of very often old bunkum. How that story came to light, but also some of the methodology that behind the research. And it's just a really it makes you think about how you're approaching your own stuff and your own business and the assumptions that we make. And it's really good, and I like it. It just makes you think.
Yeah, I've written that down, so I'm going to go and grab that on an audio.
And it's got sort of a bit of an oomph about it. And I don't know about you, but I've been, and this is another what did you learn this week? Boy, am I cross.
Oh, I'm cross too.
Sorry, folks. I don't know if this has got anything to do with the menopause. I don't know. I'm going to blame it on that. I am really, really cross at the moment. I mean, seriously, don't get in my way. I am horrible.
No.
I am really angry about stuff, and I have no idea what for.
No, do you know what? I'm so interested. I've been cross too, even to the point where, like, we were talking about family, and they went, "Have I done something wrong?" I go, "No, you just seem really cross." It's like, am I? Yeah, even you just said that.
What are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it? Is it the hot? Is it the heat? Oh, dear.
I don't know.
The help, but absolutely. And I felt cross as well, even with people that don't normally make me cross. I felt cross.
So I don't know what's going on. I mean, these are two sort of women over 50, okay, who got some challenges.
lucky enough it's hot outside, but it is cool in the studio.
Before we've even started. And both of us are really cross. So I don't know if it's us sort of dealing with hormone changes. I've got no idea. I don't know if it's us as business women with a state at the moment where we're not entirely sure what's going on. It's really difficult to plan for things. You put plans in place and then suddenly, all is not as you thought it was going to be, which makes life really frustrating, and it means everything takes so much longer. I just don't know if we're just cross.
No, I agree though. But just in this week, I've had people that have perhaps not turned up to meetings on time because they're sort of trying to get back to normal. Somebody went, I forgot the meeting, which is always goes with the territory with what I do as well. And people are late, and like you said, you get a few of those, and it starts to you feel it.
And that's the thing, is it isn't a particular person or a situation that's making me cross. I'm just angry. Yeah,
absolutely. And and to some point, and that's when you can't always pinpoint it, or I call it if there was like a thermometer gauge behind me over my head or my aura, you just feel like that. And again, I just caught myself probably yesterday evening. It was extremely hot. I had just finished. Somebody had cancelled at the last minute, and I thought, I just want to get through my day. And then I just thought, just sit down. And I did. And actually, I couldn't, like you said, pinpoint one thing.
And I think what helped me was just acknowledging that actually I don't know what I'm angry about, but I am really angry about stuff. And just letting that sort of be okay.
Absolutely. It is to be okay. And not justifying it or just say, why am I, is there anything, what is it, 5 minutes, and then just stop the discussion, and it is what it is.
It would be interesting to know whether other people, men, women, doesn't really matter, whether just people in general are feeling like that at the moment.
Yeah.
And what they're doing about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, again, in our in the worlds that we're living in, we are just dealing with things that we're not used to. We've got teams that aren't around us because of, here in the UK, they've got COVID, or they're self-isolating, or the children are. We've got customers that can't turn up because of that. It's all these moving parts, like you said, John. It's not just us that are angry. If other people are as well, then that's quite a lot of.
But I'm looking at other people every now and then. I'm thinking, are you as angry as I am? Are you really cross? Are you being fractious? Are you being nasty to other people? And I'm thinking, actually, no, you're not. So I'm feeling a little bit like, oh, hang on, this is just me. Or is it that we're all managing to really sort of hide it well, and that's actually making the situation worse, and people are looking at me and going, hey, she's so cool, isn't she? How's she so cool?
Yeah, do you know what? There is some frustration.
And I'm having a fume.
But when you talk to people and you get more of a detailed conversation, you actually, I've had a few longer calls this week where you do get underneath it, and actually they do open up, and probably not as angry as I've been on some days, but there are some frustrations from the people I've spoken to.
Yeah, I just feel as though my sort of, I think we all have a limit where we hit it. It's a bit like those things where you bash a weight at the fair, and it sort of goes up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think we all have a point where you tip that, you bash that, and suddenly like there's an eruption. And I feel like I'm just below that all the time.
Yes.
And that any minute now, it doesn't need much of a sort of bash. You only need a very small hammer on the weight, and it's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, so when I probably got to just under that yesterday, I went and looked at my diary and I thought, okay, that's been cancelled, I can shuffle that round. And then I looked at Friday afternoon and I thought, do you know what, that is clear, because I left it clear. And that's going to be my headspace. And I'm not, even if I get there, if you've got 5 minutes, can I speak to you? I've just literally put that in my diary called red headspace, and I'm going to use it tomorrow.
I was going to save this but you saying that reminded me, I was going to save this sort of for the end of the show where we have a top tip or that sort of thing. But, I thought, oh, well, what the hell? Let's do it now. I sat and thought about what I'd stopped doing over the last sort of 3 to 4 weeks that may have contributed, or what I was doing that may have contributed to these feelings of anger. And one of the things I have done is I've stopped journaling. So I do a lot of journaling. I sit down and I write stuff out. Sometimes it's utter rubbish. I'm not doing anything particularly constructive. I'm just doing a brain dump journal. And I've stopped doing that.
Yes.
Not quite sure why, to be honest. I haven't had the time. I've been quite tired, so I've stopped it. And I'm not sure if that would sort of, if I need to start again, basically. But I need to create the space. It's what you've said. You know, it's actually about creating that space. You know, by the time I'm stopping at the moment, by the time I've reorganised everything that keeps needing to be reorganised because everything's changed, it's bedtime. And then I'm getting up in the morning and, hey, I'm off again. And I haven't been taking that time to sit down and do as much planning, and I'm just reacting all the time.
Absolutely. And for me, journaling, so when I know, and I know we're going into like the top tips, but for me, that journaling and that sitting down, I have to get out of my own head. And for me, I'm like you, Sian, I'm a pen to paper type of girl. I will like to just journal that out, and I know it makes sense to me, but the main thing is it has to be out of my head, because like yourself, I might skip 1 or 2 days of journaling, and that might be okay, but a week later my head just is full. It needs to be out. And what I had done, I get up early in the morning to do that before the rest of the world gets up, and I'd let that slip, which then everything else is slip. And I realised then, actually, Adelle, get up, and I did, and just started that journaling and that thought process again.
And for me, journaling, there are 2 types of journaling. So one of them is where I may sit down and I've got a particular problem that I want to solve, and I may have some questions that I ask, and I will answer them because I've got an end result that I want. The journaling that I'm talking about, you don't actually need a journal. You just need a pen, a pencil and some paper. And there's nothing structured about this. It's just you sit down and it's like free writing, and it's whatever old crap comes out your head.
Yeah, it is. And do you know what? And how I knew I needed to get back to that habit, and it is that morning I was on a walk, and I got to that point where I just stood, and it was warm. I sat on the wall. It wasn't anybody's wall. What's she doing? And I literally just got my audio and I just spoke. And I thought, I feel okay now. And that's what I did, because I'd really let that journaling of just that brain dump, that morning headspace, I just hadn't do it. And I realised, as always, how important that habit was to me, only when I wasn't doing it. And that's the most important thing to me.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's what I found is I didn't do it one day, and then guess what? I didn't do it the next day. And then after a while, I was actually too stressed to do it. I didn't want to sit down and do it.
Yeah.
And so I then had, I think it's what some coaches and things call resistance.
Yeah, just a bit.
Resistance to doing it.
Yeah.
So in other words, you now don't, you know it will help you. You know it will help you, but you're resisting actually sitting down and doing it and getting that help. And I think at some point, it's going to sound a little bit philosophical, but I think at some point we sort of flip over into quite enjoying, but sort of the not feeling good, and the adrenaline and the stress and the rush starts to sort of have a little bit of an addictive feel about it, where you then don't want to sit down and do the journaling and do the stuff that's actually going to make you feel better, whatever that is. It could be meditation, or whatever. And that was the point that I'm at, and I recognise it. Actually, I'm actually actively now stopping doing what I know is going to make me feel better.
Yep.
So now I have to sort of force myself to get back in and rebuild that habit again.
Yeah, and it's breaking that cycle. And for me, I didn't plan to do it on the walk. I just thought, I thought, I've had enough. I was literally having this conversation with myself, and I thought, I just got to get out of my own head. Obviously, he didn't have a pen and paper, so I literally just journaled. I just spoke straight into my phone, and I thought, right, Adelle, that's broken. Now sort yourself out, and tomorrow we're back on plan.
I don't know why we do this. I'm saying why we do this because I don't think I'm the only person who does this. I think it's actually quite a common thing where you know something's going to help because you've done it before, and yet you're resisting doing it. And I think partly it's because our subconscious brain thinks that this stress and rushing around is actually going to get us somewhere, that we're going to do something quicker, faster, better. Yeah. And that just isn't the case.
No, it isn't. And I say to the guy, I try to catch myself, but sometimes we're our own worst enemy, and we go to that break point, and it's just trying to. But again, when I say to myself, and I talk to people I talk to, okay, we got here. Do you know what? Let's not dwell. Let's go forward and not be hard on ourselves, and just for the next time. But we also have to put that on the backdrop that we are, and as businesswomen, managing us, families, clients, and businesses in really different circumstances we haven't known. So, do you know what? If we broke the few journaling, it's just reminded us why we do it. And that's me then being kind to myself and moving on.
Yeah, and I think for me, I've been saying over the last sort of 15 months, whilst we've been in and out of lockdown in the UK, I thought I'd accepted that things are a forever moving feast. It doesn't matter what somebody says today; it could be changed tomorrow. But when we heard that restrictions were going to lift on the 19th of July, I was really prepared for that not to happen. I really was prepared for that not to happen. And then when it did happen, I didn't realise that I'd switched off. I sort of took, OK, there we are, we're there, we're done. And then what happened was, the no masks thing. And I decided I was going to do social distancing at my events, but that I would go along with the no masks thing. And then the venues that I run out of, who are large academies, of course they're schools, decided that anybody who was using their buildings had to continue wearing masks. So I'm now, and I don't object to that at all. I don't have a problem with it. It's just that I now have to go back and tell people who had made assumptions, as I had, that they would no longer having to be wearing masks, that actually now they do need to wear masks. And it's all of that sort of little thing that is just one more thing that you've got to do. And we have just got to accept that inside, because I'd accepted it outside, but I hadn't really accepted it inside, that all of this switch change, do a reverse about turn and have to tell lots of people really quite quickly, is the world that we're in now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, there's that having that external view, and then that internal view is like, oh, not again, and I've got to do this, and there's these people, how am I going to communicate? Yeah, exactly. And I so echo that. And that, again, this week is something that I've got to reconcile, that is just as we are at the moment.
But I think moving forwards, it's how it's going to be.
I agree.
And what I need to do is build in my own robustness and learn how to manage my own expectations and, importantly, to manage other people's expectations and not to assume, because people have assumed that they won't have to wear masks at the event, and I have allowed that to continue because that's what I thought. And actually, no, that is not the case. Other people have made decisions. I have a choice, either use those venues or don't use those venues, and they're lovely. They're super, super venues, and I'm really privileged to be able to use them, and I want that to continue, and I respect the rules that have been imposed. I'm not at all objecting. It's just a bit, okay, calm. Calm.
Exactly. And that's what we're dealing with, and that's why we cannot be hard on ourselves. We're dealing with the next moment, the next change of decision, the next U-turn, and we're just trying to go forward. But it's not just us, though. We are leading events, and it's not just us, are we? We're leading other people.
And I think that's one of the benefits of journaling is if I'd have sat down and actually asked myself the question, what could happen now?
Yep.
What could happen now? I'd got hey, we could go into another lockdown, or the restrictions might not be lifted, but I hadn't got actually, the place where you hold the venues where you hold your events may insist on X, Y, and Z, and it's actually a really, really obvious thing that could happen, and yet I hadn't got it. And if I'd have sat down and just asked myself that question in relation to these events, what could happen now? It probably would have come out. It would have revealed itself, and I would have preempted it and gone to people and said to exhibitors and said to visitors, hey guys, this is quite likely what's going to happen, so just be prepared for it.
Yeah. And I think that is really good. And if anybody is doing any programs or training or events or anything like that, I would definitely do the what if statement journaling on everything.
And I think we might. I'm not sure if we have disappeared off the Menopause Special. I think we have and we haven't, because a lot of what we're discussing now, a lot of the symptoms that we have been experiencing as women in business may or may not be related to the fact that we deal with the menopause. In my particular case, I can't have HRT because I've had breast cancer. So I do it sort of, I suppose, cold turkey. But I have no idea. But some of the things we've been talking about, some of the techniques we've been talking about are very relevant to some of the symptoms that you might be dealing with. So I think what we need to do is actually have a chat about some of those symptoms. I think some of the common symptoms, some of the things that people make jokes about, like the hot flushes.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of, and putting weight on.
Yep.
I think they're out there, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're thin hair.
Yep.
So,
Sleepless nights.
Those are the sorts of things that are out there they're part of the general dialogue that goes on
Absolutely.
around menopause, and people think they're funny. People who are dealing with them don't think they're quite so funny.
No, definitely not.
But I think we all know those. But there are some unusual and misunderstood symptoms that I think women themselves misdiagnose and attribute them to something else. And also professionals misdiagnose them. I think doctors misdiagnose them. I think people in the workplace make assumptions and don't take into account that actually this person may be dealing with the symptoms of menopause. So, Adelle, this is your particular speciality. So perhaps you can just run through some of the things that women do not attribute to menopause.
So for me, if we start at the top, so we start with the mind. So women will not attribute maybe like a panic attack, or there could be some anxiety. And do you know what? Like, just our conversation regarding, I've got to go to an event, I've got to plan things, it feels very much more laboured than they would have had before. And also, then when they are presented or talking to people, like we said before, sometimes you feel like you can't string a sentence together, or you're halfway through something and you go, I forgot what I'm going to say. Or, embarrassingly, I'm looking at somebody and I'm like, I cannot remember their name. And do you know what? My brain's called Brian. And in my head, I say, Brian, for God's sake, can you catch up? Brian, yeah, I see you. I walk off and I go, oh, it was Tracy. But she's walked away.
But sometimes they're people that you know really, really well.
They are,
and there's no excuse.
It's scary. And the thing is, there's no excuse. And then the laughter is actually more of a scared laughter. Yeah, because you think, I know this person and I know what I'm going to say and I can't remember. And you go, oh, yeah, and you walk away. And you laugh for a minute and then that's scary. And that is the bit then that people will worry about. And then what happens then, I call it the brain effect. So then you'll get a few of those and then you'll worry. And what happens is the more we worry about it, it actually makes it worse. And for me, that's when women think to myself, the brain fog, they're losing my mind. And if, as well, women potentially have got a history of family with Alzheimer's or dementia, Sian, then they get really worried. And for me, and then you're self-diagnosing, and women talk around that or depression way before they think of menopause. And depending on their healthcare provider, that might then exacerbate that as well, which is my personal experience on that one. So there are lots of things that we spoke about. And the talk before is quite common for women of our age. And that's why I help women to do the things that we do around journaling and notes, etc. But I think for me, the more I work in this field, the more I talk to women, it is very misunderstood, the impact on our brains.
So the message there is that this is normal. I think it's also temporary. I want to say it's temporary.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that at some point after a certain number of years a switch is going to suddenly ping and it will all just go away. I think the thing is, it's actually temporary, as in the moment.
Absolutely.
So it could be a moment of anxiety. It could be a moment of forgetting somebody's name or being confused. But that if you perhaps take a step back, it'll be okay.
Yep.
And that the next time you see them or another person, you may remember their name or somebody, or whatever. It's not a situation that's permanent.
No. And I will let you into a secret why, because this is the bit that I do like, the fun stuff, the science. So, because I am a bit of a nerd. So from a science point of view, the best way of describing that would be a fluctuation, because if only our estrogen levels dropped nicely but slowly. But you know what? They have a fluctuation. I call it the hokey cokey. One day they're in, and one day they're out, okay? Now, if they're in an undecided day and your estrogen levels are going up and down, the moment you walk into a room, yeah, and you're going to meet, if estrogen decides to do a quick exit to the right, I love her, you will get that moment, okay? So the best way I look at it, if, when it's raining hard here in the UK and the lights flicker, that could be a fluctuation. If you then get really, oh my God, I'm going to forget, that adrenaline will make that worse. It's like losing the satellite dish. You have lost everything. So for me, it is triggered by the hormones in the brain. So what happens over time, once you start to get post-menopausal and you get less fluctuations and it's lower, but it's steady, then it's better.
So I think the other thing that you're saying here is that we've got two things. We've got two reactions at play here. The first is that a lack of estrogen has meant that we can't, I'm doing it now, meant that we keep forgetting, we might forget what our next word is supposed to be, or maybe forget somebody's name. As a result of that, we then have a boost of adrenaline,
Yes.
cortisol levels rise,
Yes.
and we then go into our fight and flight response.
Absolutely.
At which case you can't remember anything apart from, am I going to stand here and freeze, or am I going to run out the room?
Absolutely.
And when that kicks in, it just exacerbates the situation, doesn't it? And it's about, I think once you understand that there are two mechanisms in place here, life gets a lot easier.
It does. And then if you're not careful like us, then your front brain stops working, and then you're going to could be in trouble with the people around you, and you're really going to forget things. So yeah, it is that hormone level at play there.
My solution to this is just honesty, actually.
It is.
I trying to sort of sit there and wrestle and try and remember this person's name, even though I know them very well. Bearing in mind, I'm speaking here as a woman who's forgotten her own name quite often, so there's no hope for me remembering somebody else's, is just actually to be honest about it and have a bit of a laugh.
No, Sian, and I agree with you, and to be honest, and do you know what? And I'll share a little bit of my story. So I wasn't honest. A little bit 11 years ago when this started to me, at 40 in the boardroom, I did not know what was going on, and I wasn't being honest. And I got to the point where I couldn't present, and someone said to me, and I bet you don't even remember your own name. And that is what they said to me. And I left the boardroom, I thought, what the hell is going on with me? And that was my moment of, oh my God, something's not right. And it was because literally someone said to me, you can't even remember your own name. And I couldn't.
Were they being horrid?
It was a challenging situation, and we were working together as a group. And at the time, I probably wasn't being honest, that I was forgetting things, and I probably looked like I wasn't contributing enough to the group, and I was trying my best, but I couldn't get it out, and I was too embarrassed to say, I don't know what I'm talking about, and I had the slides in front of me. But at 40, I really thought that I thought I was losing it, and I felt uncomfortable, and the people in the room were losing their patience with me.
And this is one of the things that I've found about being a businesswoman. My motto is actually doing my own thing, and I want to help other people do their own thing. That's what it's about. And being in business actually just makes that easier. And when you do have your own business, you don't have to explain it to other people. Now, somebody else may be sitting there and thinking, well, that's all very well, but if you're presenting to a client, if you want a new client to come on board, all of this sort of thing, you sort of have to look like you're competent and know what you're doing. But, I think that you attract the client that you need. And that I would, if I was a client, I would totally understand why somebody may be perhaps losing particular words. I wouldn't have a problem with that. And would I, as a businesswoman, want a client who just didn't get that at all, had no empathy, had no understanding, who was just going to say, actually, just, the fact that you've forgotten a word, that's it. That's it. Yeah, I can't work with you. I'll tell you what, if that's how you feel, you can go and do the other thing. Yep. Because just because I can't remember your name or I can't get the right word out in the right way does not mean I can't help you and deliver a service to you. They're two totally different things.
Absolutely.
And so you've just got to be honest about it, because it is going to happen. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And there's no point in trying to hide it. The more you try and hide it, the worse it actually gets.
It is. And that was the lesson that I realised 11 years ago. But unfortunately, I wasn't in my own business. I was in somebody else's, and I had a responsibility to present their business. I don't now. Obviously, I've taken the leap of faith.
But that's also the other thing, is that you may have a manager that you have to explain something to. Yeah. There are also other managers, perhaps to the side of you, who would quite like to take over.
Yes.
who would quite like to take over your empire. And so, once you're in the boardroom situation, may well take advantage of the fact that you have this thing where you can't remember somebody's name.
Absolutely.
And instead of perhaps joining in and making it easier, will actually try, albeit underhand, to make it even more comfortable. You don't have that when you've got your own business.
You don't.
You just don't. I don't have to explain anything to anybody.
No. And I love that now, because 11 years ago I was the minority in the room as well. So again, it was just a perfect storm for me. But having those challenges now, and like you said, I'm running my own business now, so I don't have to do that boardroom. And for me, the type of clients I attract get it anyway, because we're all in this together. But I agree with you. I will attract the clients I want. And even as a menopause coach doing what I'm doing, I'm brilliant on most days, and we all have those off days, but do you know what? It doesn't matter, because it's where we are. I do not have that pressure of having to feel like I've got to perform through menopause and not explain why.
So it's be honest.
Absolutely, be honest.
Be honest. Don't try, if you've forgotten something, don't try and pretend you haven't, because everybody's going to know anyway. So just be honest. You may or may not explain why.
Absolutely.
Doesn't matter.
Just be honest. Absolutely.
So we've got the mental health issues, confusion issues, and not being able to remember somebody's name does not mean that's just you can't remember somebody else's name. Let's not make it more than it is I think is the other thing, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. It's absolutely. It's not. Don't make it anything else. And if you when we say, am I going through it? For me, the work that I'm doing and the people I talk to and the research is, this process of decline could start as early as 38 and go all the way through. The average age at the moment in the UK is 51. So, if you are over that age, then, there are an absolute possibility that your hormones are starting to decline.
And what about your sort of advice for dealing with anxiety? So let's be clear here. We're not talking about clinical depression. No. We're not talking about diagnosable conditions. We're talking about anxiety, which if you haven't really had it before, and if you suddenly have a panic attack or just feeling very, very anxious and you have no idea why, you don't know what it is, you're just feeling a bit like us feeling angry. But anger can sometimes be quite powerful, but just being anxious and not knowing why can actually be really disempowering. It can sort of, push you back into a corner and find you rummaging in your handbag for something to distract yourself with. It could be a full-blown panic attack. What advice have you got to help people deal with that? So
for me, again, when women talk to me, is just journal or diary note, because sometimes there's a pattern around these anxiety, especially like myself. I'd never experienced it before. Everyone used to joke, Adelle made men cry in the boardroom, and all of a sudden it felt they were making me cry. I was having anxiety. The why. So for me, it is just making a note of those and thinking, okay, it's not normal. I don't feel right. I feel real overwhelmed here. What is it? And make a note in that diary. And then also, Sian, I do talk about food, move and snooze. I talk about it all the time. Just think, is there something? Yeah, it was a move. Was there a trigger? Was there just something there? And start thinking about it rather than taking it personally. And then for me, then I started to see a pattern in those. And then I started to go, actually, this is a real overwhelm and there's no rhyme or reason why. And I just made a note of those. I journaled, and then they started to become more frequent. And because I did an acknowledgement, obviously, it went completely to overwhelm and burnout. But for me, that would be to make a note of those and just think them through.
And what about, and I have some tips for if this happens and you're in the room or you're doing something and you can't take yourself off to journal. Yeah. You're there. What do you do?
So what I do for me is if I'm on a desk, my hands will go under my desk, and I do a form of like tapping, but I've got a certain thing that I do with my hands that I know that it will calm me down, because The one thing is I've learned, and especially as women in business in the workplace, is keeping the cortisol under control. So as soon as I'm feeling it, it will be my head above the desk, absolutely fine, and I'm concentrating. But I go to my default, which is I will just work my two fingers together and I'll say to myself, just calm down, and it will go, because I want to get those cortisol levels down so I haven't got the two things at play. I find that works for me. Other people will grab a pencil or glasses, but I have to hold on to something.
So another technique is, and this sounds really, really obvious. Okay, people will be going, "Duh, of course I thought of that," but actually it's quite hard to do. You tend to forget that. Actually, take some really deep breaths. A very deep breath in and a deep breath out, and also to put your breathing down into your into your stomach, because when you are very tense, your shoulders are up. When you start panicking, your shoulders go up, and you start shallow breathing, and that's sort of up in the top of your chest. You sort of make it consciously go further down into your diaphragm. All of these things will actually start to calm you down slowly, but our reaction is to do shallow breathing and hunch our shoulders and bring everything really up. So you can make it sort of conscious, get it as a habit. Oh, here we go, boom, feeling stressed, breathing. The other thing, I mean, we mentioned, you mentioned tapping. So EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, and tapping is wonderful. Okay. Perhaps we ought to post some stuff about it, but there's lots of stuff online. If you go and look for tapping, Nick Ortner from the Tapping Solution has free videos and free apps, which are a lifesaver. Tapping, in my opinion, works.
Yep. The two go-to for me is breathing. And again, what we find over time is we do shallow and it becomes a habit. So we breathe up high. So for me, tapping and breathing, when I talk to women about, the first thing is calm, is tapping and breathing. You know,
it could be that actually if you're able to get yourself out of the room, go to the toilet. Say, excuse me, just off to the, just off to use the facilities. Just get yourself out the room, but also to know that it will pass.
It will, absolutely, it will pass. And get out the room, go for a walk. But if sometimes you're in the middle of something and that can feel overwhelming, then breathe, because nobody can see you doing that, and tapping under the desk.
It's natural, it's normal, it's going to pass. Be honest. We need to speed this up, actually, because what we haven't mentioned is some of the physical symptoms. So unusual, perhaps unexpected physical symptoms. We're going beyond wean yourself here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we know that one. Pelvic floor exercises. What else is there?
And that is linked to muscle. So the one when I talk to women, yes, mine, but the one because they can notice the opposite effect, is muscle loss. And that is so important, because then that also leads to bone density. So muscle loss and osteoporosis will keep on declining. You must face into that, and you must understand that, the way that you look after yourself, the way you eat, the way you train. I've completely changed the way I have changed because of my loss of muscle and of my bone density, because I was at 40 early. And those are the things I will preach all of the time about.
So on the muscle, and I realise that, firstly, a disclaimer, this is not a medical programme. We are not, you go and you do this, you take this advice, and it is with the advice of your own doctor, your own personal trainer. If you have somebody that you're working with, whoever your advisor is, that's where you're going to, when you do this personally yourself. But as far as the muscle loss goes, let's just say, there is a risk of osteoporosis, muscle loss. What is the best sort of exercise or remedy for women?
So for me, it is an element of strength training. And when I say that, we're going, but I don't want to go into the gym. Do you know what? There's body weight, there is dumbbells. But for women, I would suggest that at least 3 times a week, some strength training that covers their lower body, their pelvic floor, their core and their upper body.
So what do you mean by strength training?
So what I would do is, with women, it could be walking. So even walking itself for long distances is strengthening the legs. And then also, I've got my ladies doing box press ups. You can sit in the chair and do leg extensions and shoulder presses with dumbbells or body weight. But think of it as top, middle and bottom. You have muscles all over you, and they really do need to be strengthened, because I hear stories every day of women having falls and accidents, and and then being diagnosed with sarcopenia, which is the posh word for muscle loss, and osteoporosis, Sian. So it's more common than we think.
And the exercises can be quite simple, so you don't necessarily have to do them in a gym.
No.
But you do. I think we need to sort of bit of an override. You do need to be careful.
Absolutely,
you do need to be. We're not talking about weightlifting here.
No,
strength training is not the same as weightlifting.
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. And this is why I do a lot of work around the education of strength training, because women think it is. It absolutely is not. It could be as simple as 20 minutes 3 times a week. This is not powerlifting. This is functional training, which is so important for us.
Thank you for sharing that. I think we need to get back on to just sort of rounding the show up, because we've only got literally a couple of minutes left. So what is your top tip for dealing with the menopause from a personal point of view?
So from a personal point of view, do you know what I want to say to all ladies? Go and get curious. Do not turn your back on the process, because it's not optional. So go and find out how your body will change, please, for me.
My top tip is actually to be honest. It's to just say, hey, I've forgotten. Sorry. I know I've known you for 40 years. But I can't remember. I can't remember your name. Yeah. And what do you know now that you wish you'd have known at the start of your menopause journey?
That it's not personal, and I'm not the only one going through it. And I wished I'd talked to other women and was honest with myself as well as other people. I think mine is that I'm not going mad. There may be some people out there that might argue with that. That actually I'm not going mad. I'm not going mad. You know, there are hormones, lack of hormones, all sorts of things that cause anxiety, and it's not that there's something wrong with our brains. No, there's not. And that confusion and all of that sort of thing is, once again, the same. It does not mean I'm loopy. It just means that things are changing and I might need to approach things in a different way. But, you know, I can still run my business and I can still do my stuff. We can. So, Adelle Martin, thank you very much. Lovely co-host. I'm Sian Murphy. We will be back in the Women in Business radio show studio very shortly next week. Bye. Bye.
Tune in next week to the Women in Business radio show.